Alright, so today maybe something that you didn't do in any great detail last year, but solving absolute value equations. So first, absolute value means distance from 0. Excuse me. So if you had the absolute value of 3, think of a number line. 3, how far is it from 0? It's 3. If you had the absolute value of -5, how far is -5 from 0? 5. Okay, so we're just, regardless of positive or negative, it's still going to be the same distance. Like from, so if you had -5, it's 5 spaces from 0, but so is positive 5. Okay, so here's kind of, for the first group of problems you're going to have, it's not actually equations, it's just simplifying some absolute value stuff. Okay, do everything inside absolute value first. So they kind of act like parentheses in that way. So if you do order of operations, parentheses comes first. Absolute value comes first. So if you had, let's say, absolute value 8 plus the absolute value of -3, you'd want to say, well, the absolute value of 8 is 8. Absolute value of -3 is 3. And then you do 8 plus 3. You could have like negative absolute value 2 times -4. So you do 2 times -4, which is -8. The absolute value of -8 is 8, and then this negative still comes down, and the overall answer would be -8. Okay, if you had that means -24 divided by 6, so -4, absolute value of -4 is 4. So you'll have a few problems that are just numbers. There's no equations involved. Okay, so then you'll start with some equations. And so here's kind of a, let me write down something first. Here's like some steps. So number 1, get absolute value by itself. So you don't want any adding, subtracting, multiplying, or dividing on the outside of the absolute value. Inside is fine. But if there's anything on the outside, you want to move that over to the other side of the equation. Okay, and I'll show you what that looks like in a minute. So after you do that, you're going to write two equations. One positive, one negative. And then you'll solve. Goodness, I have trouble right today. Solve each equation separately. I think I spelled that wrong. So not every problem will you have to do this. So the absolute value may already be by itself. But every problem you should write to one positive, one negative, and then solve. So here's kind of a simple problem. So what I mean by get the absolute value by itself, like if there was like a number in the front or anything like out here, you'd need to take care of that first. But otherwise, there's nothing on that side of the equal sign except for the absolute value, which is what we want. And so when it says to write an equation or write two equations, one positive, one negative, I'm going to take whatever's on the inside of the absolute value and then, it equals 4. But then I'm also going to write one that equals negative 4. So that's what I mean by do one positive and one negative of whatever is right there. And then you'd solve it, but it's already solved. So absolute value in almost all cases is going to have two answers. And they're not always 4 and negative 4, 2 and negative 2, 3 and negative 3 like that. You could have, 2 and negative 6, stuff like that. So so if we add x plus 3 equals 8. So again, there's nothing, in the front right here. There's nothing like after it. So the absolute value is by itself. Write two equations. X plus 3 equals 8. X plus 3 equals negative 8. Solve each one separately. So I would do minus 3 there. Give 5. On this side, I would do minus 3. That part will be the same. Where on both of them, we did minus 3 to both sides. But the answers will be different. Negative 8 and negative 3, or minus 3, either way. Negative 11. So, different numbers, a lot of the time, one positive answer, one negative answer. It's not 100%, but it's a lot. It's possible to have two positive answers. It's possible to have two negative answers. Okay? All right. So if I had This will be probably like one of the hardest ones that you do today, just because it's more steps. But so get the absolute value by itself. So I don't want this 6 over here. So I'm not going to do anything to the absolute value in this like process. Okay, so no matter what's on the inside, that's going to stay the same. Okay, so absolute value by itself, nothing's in the front, there's no adding or subtracting after. Write two equations. 2x minus 4 equals 6. 2x minus 4 equals negative 6. Then solve each one separate. So the solving part should hopefully be a little bit easier now that we've done this for a couple days, but negative 6 plus 4, negative 2. Divide by 2. X equals negative 1. So again, like, how do I know if my answers are right or what? Okay, I got 5 and I got negative 1 and I did all this stuff. Well, what we're saying is if I plug in 5 back to the original problem, it'll work. I should get, it says equal 12. I should get 12 on the other side. So just to kind of show you, if I did absolute value 2 and I put 5 there, minus 4 plus 6 equals 12. So I always struggle like it's bigger. Do what's in the absolute value first. Minus 4 is 6. So you can probably see right now it's going to work. Okay, and if I did negative 1, it would work also. Okay, so the only other thing we need to be careful of is like when will not work. Okay, so if you go all the way back to what absolute value is, we said distance from 0. And distance cannot be negative. You cannot walk negative 5 feet. If you walked 5 feet backwards, you didn't walk negative 5 feet, you walked 5 feet backwards. If you like got into a car and drove backwards, 30 feet, like you're coming out of a driveway or something, you didn't drive negative 30 feet. You drove 30 feet backwards. So it's always positive. So if you had, you're doing your work and you ended up with that, where you have the absolute value by itself and it equals negative, that's impossible to do, because if we get an answer, what we're saying is when I plug it in, it's going to work. So people all the time say, well, when you plug it, like if you did negative 3, well, absolute value of negative 3, you get positive 3 because distance is always positive. So that didn't work. No matter what you plug in there, nothing's going to work because you won't get a negative out of there because distance is not negative. Okay, so if you come across a problem like this, the answer is no solution. Okay, so it could look like that. It could look like If there's other stuff inside the parentheses. Okay, now again, this is important to remember. Nothing in the front, nothing being added or subtracted after, and it equals a negative number, no solution. Okay, it's possible, and we'll go into this a little bit more tomorrow, but it's possible to have it equal a negative number at the very beginning of the problem and then work itself out, and it's not, and you'll get answers that work. It's also possible for it to start as a positive number. At the very beginning, you have whatever the problem is equals a positive number, and you end up with a no solution. Okay, so a very simple example of that. So that's our original problem. Get the absolute value by itself. So I would do minus 5 over here. Don't do anything to the absolute value. 1 minus 5 is negative 4. And no matter what number you plug in for x, when I do plus 3, the absolute value distance is positive. So because of that, negative, no solution. So you'll have a couple problems today that will end up with no solution. The rest of them, you'll get 2 answers. And most of the time, 1 positive answer, 1 negative answer. They don't have to be the same number, okay? But really get that process down. Like, say it to yourself like every time you start a problem. Get the absolute value by itself. Write 2 equations, 1 positive, 1 negative. Solve the 2 equations separately. It's really important, okay? All right, so the problems today shouldn't be very difficult. We'll do some more tomorrow that have a little bit more challenging aspect to them, but today should just be an introductory day where they're fairly straightforward. Okay? All right, have a good one, guys. Talk to you later.